All right. Got it. Okay. Thank you. All right. So I think we're ready now. We've got technology. We've got the recording on. We're all set. Good. So really, I'm very pleased to be here tonight. And I really hope this will be a very interactive and engaging presentation. The title of my presentation is quite broad in terms of mastering communication and leadership skills in the medical field. And what I thought I would do is really just share with you some kind of very basic approaches or principles that I have really honed over my years as a healthcare practitioner, both at Sunnybrook Hospital for 10 years and also working in the medical affairs function in the pharmaceutical industry. And so what I've decided to do is basically really break up the presentation into 6 different aspects. Mastering leadership and communication really boils down to how you feel, how you think, how you act, how you communicate, how you interact, and also how you react. And so what I'll do is I'll spend the next little bit kind of going through each of these 6 areas and a little bit more, giving you a little taste and flavor of exactly what I mean, how I have tried to apply these principles over the 20 plus years of my professional career, and then hopefully leave some time for some questions. All right, so let's jump right in. What do we mean by how you feel? So what I've always said is that the best leaders that I have come across in my professional career are the ones that have tremendous self-awareness. And what I mean by this is that they are fully aware of their emotional strengths as well as their blind spots. And more importantly, they're also aware of how their mood impacts the actions of others. Okay. And if you think about it, think about times where you have been in the company of other individuals. Have you had any situations where another individual's mood may have inadvertently affected your mood? Well, that actually applies equally in the situation of leadership. And what's more important is that leaders can really leverage this skill to recharge or energize their team members or colleagues during various points. But what's very, very important is, especially stressful situations, but where it's very important as well, is that leaders not only need to kind of leverage and strategically utilize their self-awareness of their moods, but it's important that they also maintain their energy levels in order to help others recharge and minimize stress. Okay, so the first one here is really about how you as a leader feel and making sure that you have that self-awareness of your emotions, how it affects others, and also to make sure that you always focus and maintain time to recharge your own energy levels. Okay, so the next area that I thought it would be nice to talk about is how you think. And what do I mean by this? Well, remember, a leader is different than an individual contributor. A leader is responsible for gaining results through others. We're not supposed to have the answers. In fact, what I've always said is leaders surround themselves with talented people. They show them what their vision is, and then they get out of their way to get it done. And so what is really important and what makes good leaders stand out from others is that they're always curious. Okay, they're not providing answers, but they're asking questions to help others get to the answer. Okay, and so what I often will say is and in fact, I have a pocket of curious or intelligent questions that I will always ask when my team members come to me with a problem, or if they're dealing with a challenge at work. And, they're coming to me because they're perplexed. They don't know what to do. It's very easy for a leader to just kind of fall into that providing the answer mode. But by doing that, you're not actually enabling your team to think and develop problem-solving skills on how to figure out their own solution. So a good leader always expresses curiosity and asks questions. Also, equally important, a good leader recognizes and respects the perspectives of others. And so not only is it about helping others learn and grow through questions, but for the leader to also be open to new ideas and ready to reconsider any points of view that they thought they had. I am very comfortable demonstrating my vulnerability to my teams. So if somebody perhaps might express a different point of view or may challenge something that I've said, it's very important as a leader not to get defensive, but to really respond curiously, to say, that's very interesting. Help me understand more. Why do you feel that way? And you'll be very impressed in terms of where that conversation takes you. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is how you act. And what do I mean by that? This is different than the first one about how you feel and how your emotions affect others. But this is really how you show up as a leader. Okay? Really good leaders are present. They're self-aware of themselves, and also they're confident. I often will say to individuals, you fake it until you make it. Even though you may be really nervous inside or, kind of just very timid or humble, you show up and exude that confidence, okay? Also, very strong leaders that I have worked with over the years have incredible emotional intelligence. So we've often talked about IQ, and clearly that's important no matter what job that you're in. You need to have the capabilities in terms of being able to deliver on the requirements of the job. But successful leaders require more than just IQ. Emotional intelligence, or EQ, I have found has been even more important to me as a leader in terms of helping me progress. What do we mean by emotional intelligence? Well, that's my ability to be able to read the room, be able to be aware of how others' actions might be telling you a particular signal, such as, if you see somebody, somebody tuning out, looking at their phone, you know that whatever you're saying is not resonating. And so you might need to perhaps flex your message, flex your communication style in order to connect to that individual. It's also being self-aware about how your emotions, how you present, how you speak, might actually impact others. So some people might be very comfortable with a leader who is very to the fact, very no pleasantries, etc. But other individuals might prefer spending a few minutes prior to a meeting just to talk and say, how are you doing? How was your weekend? How is your dog or your cat? And so understanding that emotional intelligence will allow you to connect much easier with others. And that is really important as a leader, because that connection will then translate into cultivating trust, which once again, as a leader, is very, very important. Okay. So moving on, another important component of being a leader is how you communicate. So once again, I'd like everyone to think about a time where they have gone to a lecture and they've had a lecture or even a presentation where somebody has just been so energetic and captivating and really had you sitting on the end of your seat, right? What was that individual doing? How did they communicate to inspire and motivate you? Also, then, think to another situation where you had an opposite experience, where you went to go to a lecture and you couldn't count the minutes before the lecture was over or the presentation was over. What was that individual doing? Were they making eye contact? Were they mumbling? Was it hard to hear them? Was it hard to understand? Did they just stand behind? Were they just slumping in a chair? Or were they using their body language? Were they also listening attentively or looking attentively throughout the audience? And lastly, once again, how did they project themselves? Were they speaking with confidence and conviction? Or, were they simply reading the slides and, not necessarily confident with the materials that they were covering? Or perhaps, unfortunately, and we all fall prey to this, they separate every word with an and so think about that in terms of how some strong leaders that you have observed over the years have inspired and motivated. What did they do? And try to really, reflect on that and think of ways that you can also apply that in your day-to-day activities. The next is how you interact. Okay, and as you can see here in this picture here, it's really about how you interact with others. I often say when people ask me about my leadership style, I like to be as authentic as possible, because once again, if individuals truly sense your authenticity as a leader, then they're more likely to trust you. Okay. Have you ever observed a leader that right away appears to you as a salesman, a car salesman? You feel like, oh, I don't know if I necessarily want to believe what this individual is saying. So this authenticity is really, really important. And so part of that authenticity is willing to share your knowledge with others, but also equally willing to acknowledge when you don't have the answers, but committed to getting the information. Okay. And so that in itself makes, having that authenticity and genuineness as a leader will allow you to build alliances and develop collaborative relationships, which is critical, because a leader really, once again, is not responsible for having all the answers, but really it's through leading others to find the answers, and also through leading a team to work together to develop solutions. So that ability to interact, cultivate relationships, and ultimately developing a high-performing team will be a critical success factor from a leadership perspective. And then lastly, I think I have a little bit of, I didn't realize I had some animation here. But the most important aspect here also is how you react as a leader. And what do I mean by this? Is I often will say this, is it's so important that leaders walk the talk. And so what do I mean by this? Is that if you are trying to lead your team through a very important change, where people might be nervous or scared, even for that matter, of the uncertainty ahead, right? It's so important during those times that leaders, even if you might also be experiencing those same feelings deep down, very important to self-regulate that and really make sure that you retain your composure and show stability. The worst thing a leader can do is, start to run around and worry and hypothesize, or, say, oh my God, the sky is falling, because that in itself will create a ripple effect. And so what I will often say to many students that I've had an opportunity to mentor over the years is, as a leader, always remember that you have eyes watching you. Okay, little cameras watching you all over the place. And so, that's really, really important that you are walking the talk, and that you need to make sure that you emulate your words. Okay. And so what does this require as a leader? Well, it's very important that you have this balance emotionally. You also need to hone techniques that allow you to master resilience, because leadership is tough. It's a lot of fun. Don't get me wrong. I love my job being a strategic leader in the pharmaceutical industry. But there's not a manual that is provided to you. You're often faced on a daily basis with many challenges, and they're not easy challenges to deal with. And so you need to also learn how to build that resilience to deal with this stress on a daily basis. And I can tell you many times I've received feedback from individuals when we've been in meetings where there has been some very important news that has come out, and people have made a comment, Fran, I observed you, and you really, you were that calm in the storm in the room. So, once again, as I said, even though you may not think so, as a leader, there's always individuals that are observing how you react or before you even have a chance to speak. Okay. So I've thrown at you right now 6 very high level, kind of pillars. And really those pillars have served me extremely well in my journey. And I hope that you'll be able to take some of these pearls with you as well, as part of your journey. But your journey doesn't just start by listening to me present to you today. And what I want to encourage and stress every one of you is to look at your leadership development as a 70-20-10 model. So what do I mean by that? Well, it always amazes me that throughout the years that I've had a chance to mentor and develop my team members, everyone always thinks that development means going away to complete a 7-day course. Yes, that is important because that will give you the elements, just as I have given you today, as starting blocks for your leadership development journey. And that's the 10%. That's the formal learning. And if you think about it, that represents a very small amount. So what other things that you can do? Well, the other 20% is what we call social learning, okay? And this is what I refer to finding a mentor, okay? Developing a network of individuals. And what I did throughout my journey is I observed the good leaders, and I observed what they were doing that had a tremendous impact on me. And I tried to take that away and figure out how I could apply those same skills. But I equally also learned from bad leaders. And unfortunately, people are still learning, and we are all going to make mistakes. So I cannot stress enough the importance, especially as young professionals, to reach out, start to develop your network, and reach out to individuals and ask them questions in terms of how did you, tell me about your journey. What was most impactful? What were some of the challenges? What did you do to overcome some of these barriers? And you'll be surprised how much you can learn, and even share with these mentors, this is my vision, this is my aspiration. Something that I'm challenging, I'm challenged with, or I'd like to develop more is X, Y, and Z. Do you have any advice for me? There are so many great leaders out there that are willing to share their experience with you. Okay, so that's the 20%, which is the social learning. But most importantly, what I always find, and I have found the most benefit learning is in that 70% bucket, which is really, they call it here on the job experience, but I refer to it as hands-on experience. Okay, because sadly, I know I've been to many presentations over the years, and I've spoken to many individuals. At the time, everything sounds so great, but with time, you kind of forget about it until you come across it again in your email, in your notes, whatever the situation might be. But if you make a commitment and you find an accountability partner to help you actively apply what you have learned, you'll be amazed at how well that will retain and how much you will grow from that. And so I'm sure many of you have already seen the 70-20-10. and may have thought that, this might be something that applies from a specific, learning experience, but from a leadership, this has served me really well. So I want to thank those of you that have already submitted questions to me beforehand. And if I can just perhaps use this as a point to transition to the Q&A session of the presentation, perhaps I can do that. Or would you rather that that I stop sharing and we can just open up the floor for questions to ask about any of the content that I have shared? So
I think we could start off with these questions first, and then just to start up with the discussion, and then we can open up the floor to everybody who has joined. We have lots of people here. We have over 30 people. We have almost 30.
Over 30. Oh, that's great. Yeah.
We have lots of students as well from our CNIW Summer Research Camp, and I'm sure that, I personally have some questions to ask you as well. Great. So let's start off with these questions.
Okay.
And we can open up, just have like an open floor discussion to
okay, great.
Would like to continue on.
So I've turned off my slides so I can see you guys, but I know that you can still see the slides. So I'm just going to read it on my piece of paper here. So the first question, and I thought these were really, really great questions. So thank you so much for submitting them. But the first one is, how do you ensure culturally competent communication in a diverse healthcare setting? And that is really, really true, whether it's in a healthcare setting or in my situation, in a pharmaceutical industry setting. And really, I think this is where, once again, leaders play a very important role in terms of setting the culture and increasing cultural awareness, ensuring that individuals have the knowledge and training to understand about differences in cultural preferences. So an example that I can give recently is that I work at Astellas, a Japanese-owned pharmaceutical company. And we are a global company. So and in my role, a global role, I work with colleagues in the US, in Europe, Japan, of course, China, and international markets. So you can appreciate the vast cultural diversity that I have to interact with. And is that important for me as a leader to have that awareness? Absolutely. I know that with the Japanese, that they have certain cultural preferences that are very important to them when introducing and presenting business ideas or trying to reach a consensus. Whereas when I have to interact with my American counterparts, it's not uncommon if they get right to the point, and they have no fear of telling you what their views are, whether it's good or bad. It's almost like there's absolutely no filter. So I think that is very important. And luckily, in this day and age, there is no shortage of information to learn about these different cultures. And in fact, at work, we have a tool that will allow me to list all of my team members, where they're located culturally. And then it actually provides me with some tips in terms of how we can interact with each other. So I think that's really, really important. Another point that has also been highlighted and raised over the years is that we can never forget that when we are dealing with other individuals where English may not be their first language, that it's very, very important to speak clearly, to speak slowly, to avoid using very scientific words or acronyms or anything that might impede understanding. And also, more importantly, this is where that emotional intelligence comes in, because if you are speaking with someone, and if you're really attentive to their facial expressions, sometimes you can tell whether or not, from the look of their face, if there's kind of scrunching their nose, I'm not sure if they fully understood. And so sometimes what I can do is I'll ask them a question or just say, just to make sure that we're understanding, please, can you share with me your understanding of what we just discussed, right? So that way it will validate it, as opposed to asking the question, did you understand? Because obviously people may be afraid to say no. And of course they'll say yes, even if they don't, right? So there's another way to ensure understanding is by somehow, just saying, listen, I know that we discussed a lot of different information. So, to make sure that we are fully aligned, help me understand, can you explain to me your takeaway message of our discussion? Okay. So I think that is really how I would answer that question. Okay. Good. Is it okay if I go to the next question, Suki?
Yeah, of course. Continue on. This is great.
Okay, good. Okay. So the next question is, how do you foster effective interdisciplinary collaboration between people coming from various areas of expertise? Another topic that, once again, these are great questions. And I just love it because no matter where you end up professionally, you will most likely need to work in a team setting, okay? And I love that. I always say that team stands for together, everyone achieves more. And I have so many examples where, I constantly say that the value and the output of a team is greater than the sum of all its parts. You just put individuals with phenomenal expertise together. It's limitless in terms of the potential. But how do you foster that? And there's lots of great resources that talk about that. And really, it comes down to several points. The first is that it always starts with leadership. Okay, so if the leadership really shows and is authentic in terms of the importance and the expectation they have of everyone to work together as a team in delivering, then that is very, very important. Okay. I know many times people may have been asked to work in a team, and then individuals may be working on their own because of their own self-interest. Okay, and so this is where at our company, we have a logo, a saying where we say it's one Astellas. Okay, one Astellas. And that means that there is not one function that is more important than the other, that we all have a role in terms of improving patient lives. Okay, and that's really important because once again, that message comes from the top. Okay. But what can a leader do in addition to that? And so simply putting people together on a team or sticking them in a room or sending them off to the same Zoom meeting is not going to translate into success. And so I always make a point to ensure that my expectations, my objectives are very, very clear. Okay, so this team is being pulled together with the expectation that you work together to develop this or deliver this deliverable by this date. Okay, but more importantly, to make sure that everyone understands what their roles and tasks are. Okay, so why have I brought these individuals together? Okay. Also, I mean, if you're expecting individuals to work together as a team, especially in this digital age, you need to make sure that you are providing the right tools and technology to facilitate that. And, luckily today, this is not an issue, but prior to COVID, believe it or not, our connectivity was done using a landline, a phone. It's so much better where we're able to actually share our screens and now do all these wonderful features through Zoom. If you are expecting individuals to come and be fully committed to participating, they need to know that it is a safe environment, okay, and that there are no wrong answers and that there is no chance of any repercussions because they said something wrong. Okay, so I think that is also important, and it really does tie to to developing a very safe culture. But you also want individuals to feel accountable, and you also want them to be innovative. So you need to also give them the freedom to take risks, intelligent risks, what I always say. I'm not giving you permission to go rogue or to make silly decisions that you know are wrong. It's all about really using your intelligence, using your expertise to make intelligent decisions. If you're going to ask individuals to work together, make sure you've given them proper training and development. Make sure they've got the right capabilities. And this is really, really important, because I'm sure many of you have all been part of teams where not everyone is at the right level. Okay. And that, to me, is the role of the leader, the people leaders especially. And I'm very careful when I select individuals to participate on a team. I'm not picking favorites. I am picking individuals that have the right skill set to be able to deliver. Okay. And lastly, and it goes back to the intelligent risk-taking, you need to ensure a continuous learning environment. So I, as a leader, am very comfortable with the team, giving them the freedom to make mistakes, because if we don't make mistakes, we're not growing. Okay. I have fallen down many times, but I know how to get up. But what is not acceptable is for the team to make the same mistakes over and over again and not learning from that. So that continuous learning and reevaluation is really, really critical for fostering that team. So every time a team works together and they provide a deliverable, I always ask for them to complete an after action review, to reflect in a safe environment, to say what worked well, what didn't work well. If we were to do this again, what would we change? What would we keep the same? What would we stop? Or what would we start? So I think that is really, really important to really foster that cross-functional collaboration. Okay. So then the last question here is, how do you balance being authoritative and approachable as a leader? And that's really, really a great question, because it is a balancing act. And, leadership should never be taken for granted. It is something that you need to constantly work on and sharpen the saw, and also have the willingness and ability to adapt and flex to individuals. Okay. But the most important thing and takeaway that I would like everyone to really walk away with is that leadership is about people. It's not about power. Okay. And so if you think about leadership being about people, what is it that a leader must do? Going back to those principles that I shared with you earlier, right? It's about being self-aware about how they are presenting, how they're speaking, how they're reacting or acting is going to impact others. It's also about being authentic. It's about being genuine, right? I've worked for many good leaders and I've worked for many bad leaders. And the good leaders are the ones that I knew had my back. I knew I could go to them. I knew I could connect with them. Whereas other leaders, it was just like, oh, okay, I went through the motions, but I did not trust them. Okay. And so there is a difference. And it's not that person did something deceitful. It's just the way they acted or the way they didn't act that just didn't build that connection or trust. Okay. So I think that's really, really important. Being very clear in your communication, providing expectation and in your direction. I always say to my employees, whenever we start, is I want to make sure that they understand what my expectations are of them. And likewise, I want to understand what their expectations are of me. Because if we ever run into a situation where we're not meeting expectations, I would hate for somebody to say, well, you never told me, Fran. I didn't know that's what you expected. So I'm always looking at, I always make a point to ensure that I provide that clarity. Okay. And lastly, you know, and I guess this is tied to the authenticity. And I find that this is more and more important today, more than ever, is that as a leader, you need to remember, once again, that it's about people, okay? And that these individuals that are coming to work every day also have a life, okay? So yes, they are your employee, or they're your colleague, but they may also be a daughter, a son, a husband, a wife, a sister, okay? And that their job does not define them, okay? And so it's very, very important that you as a leader demonstrate and genuinely respect our work-life balance. As I know individuals, and I always say this to my team, that, you know, family always comes first. We are all replaceable in our jobs, as much as I would hate to, you know, to everyone to feel that way, but we are. I know that, you know, when I retire, somebody will come into, you know, or when I leave this company, there will be somebody to take my role, but I am not replaceable to my husband or to my children. And I can tell you that as a leader, when my employees have come to me, you know, with a request saying, you know, my mother is ill or my child, I need to go home, I'm like, absolutely. Because I know these individuals will, you know, that if I, you know, that they need to focus their efforts on that, and that when it's time for them to prioritize work, that they will willingly do that because they know I respected their work-life balance. Okay, so those basically, this is how I kind of balance that fine line between being an authoritative and approachable leader. It is something that you need to practice. But what I always say to my individuals is that I am firm as a leader. I'm very clear in my expectations, but I'm also very fair as well. I do not want results at all costs. I recognize that, you know, I want to maintain a very productive and engaged team, and that means investing in my employees. Okay. And then,
Fran, thank you so much for that. It was a really great start to our discussion. So we do have a question in the chat from our audience.
Right.
And this was one of the questions that I wanted to ask you as well.
Okay.
And they are asking, can you explain how you would handle conflicts among team members?
Okay. All right. So that is, I'm going to stop sharing so that way I can see everybody. Is that okay? Oh,
yeah,
beautiful. This is so nice. Great. Good. Okay. So handling conflicts is never easy. And even with a lot of practice, it doesn't get any easier. But there's a lot of tools that are out there. Okay. And it's not, I guess it's something that I have learned not to be afraid of over the years. As I've indicated before, you know, when we're asking individuals now and we're inviting them to provide different perspectives, right? This in a way is going to open the door for conflicts, right? So what I have tried to do really is historically, you know, just maybe I'm aging myself, but you know, conflict was often viewed in a negative way, right? It's like we had different opinions and there was always one person who was right and one person was wrong, right? And ultimately became a battle of powers. Whereas what I try to do whenever we have a conflict is to acknowledge, you know, okay, we have different perspectives here. And so what I like to do is to first align on what that common vision is, right? And so, as you know, what was the common vision that we have of this of this conversation? Are we both committed that we need to develop this or deliver this, this website by a particular date, and with these following objectives? Absolutely. Okay, so that's always good, because it shows and reinforces alignment, that you're on the same team. Okay. And by doing that, what you're also acknowledging is that there's different ways, there's different paths to get to that same end result. Okay. So I always start by just kind of reinforcing that common vision. But then the next point that I always try to do, and it goes back to that being curious, right? Remember, one of the points that I talked about is, how you think, right? And so what I will often do is ask clarifying questions, right? Help me understand, your perspective, or help me understand what what you may not necessarily agree with what I'm proposing, right? And that, in a way, will invite individuals to kind of, so what it shows them is that you're willing to listen. Okay. And when you say, and what's really important though, is you need to truly listen. If you're going to ask the question, you need to listen. How many times have you asked a question and you know that the person wasn't even listening to your answer? They were just thinking about what they were going to say next. Did you feel like you were being heard? No. Right? So I think that's very, very important as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because personally, like I'm also like I love leading teams, and before, like in second year, I led a research team to like compete in things, and sometimes like you will have team members who are, again, they're coming from different backgrounds, they have different expertise, and they have different opinions on different things, and then all of a sudden it's like everyone's trying to contribute, but then it's like everyone's coming from a different perspective, and then it's like, me as the team leader, how do I kind of not leave everyone out, but also make sure that we're kind of working towards the same thing. So those are some really interesting tools and really important points you mentioned there about handling conflict in a team setting. So I have a question for you next. I know you mentioned a lot of like really, really good points, especially the pillars that you talked about, but I guess the most interesting thing that intrigued me was when you mentioned about emotional intelligence. So that's not something that is, that might not be natural for someone. Like, I mean, some people might be a little bit more better than others in reading the room, understanding how, our actions will influence other people, or how other people will react to us, right? So emotional intelligence, and I have noticed that a lot since, I've been working with a lot of, different PIs, a lot of different, people who run a lab or are in like really high leadership positions. And that is something that I noticed they are really good at, is that emotional intelligence and how they interact with people. And one of the things that I noticed that really inspired me was that they really care about people. All the little details that I tell them about, they remember that. And then, then whenever they can support me, they will do that. And then it's really surprising, because you're like, whoa, this person is like, all the way up there, and I'm all the way down here. And I feel like I'm actually being cared about. So in terms of emotional intelligence, if someone is, I wouldn't say like shy, but like someone who wants to enhance their emotional intelligence, how would you say that someone would go about like, practicing that or improving their skills in emotional intelligence?
Yeah. So I'd be happy to share with the group a resource that I found extremely valuable for myself personally, and I have actually implemented on many of my teams over the years. It's a little book called Emotional Intelligence. That's basically all it is. And I think it's by Travis. Give me 1 second. Let me see if I can find it here. Oh, I don't see it. Oh, wait. No, I do. 1 second. Just let me go get it.
Okay, in the meanwhile, if anyone have the questions, please fill in the chat box so Suki can raise a question later.
Okay, so it's called Emotional Intelligence 2.0, and the author is Travis Bradberry. Why do I love this reference? Well, as you can see, it fits in my hand, so it's an easy read, okay? You don't have to go back to school and get a PhD to understand this topic, okay? That's what I love. I love something that's very clear, tangible, easy takeaway messages. It's also very affordable. I think it was like maybe $40. That's not a huge investment if you think about what you could learn from this resource to help you. But also what's even better is that every book comes with a code for a self-assessment. And so this self-assessment asks you a bunch of questions and then gives you a report showing you where are your strengths, what areas you can focus on, and they even give you tips on what you can do. So I think if there, and as I said, I still have all the tests. I have done these tests over the years, and believe it or not, I have pulled out my original tests and I've made myself accountable. It's like, okay, in my original test, this is something that I scored lower on. And I can tell you that over the years, the last time I did these tests, when I had an executive coach in my new role, my coach came back and she goes, you're in the 90s and all these emotional intelligence. I said, I'm thinking to myself, well, I hope so, because I've really done my homework and I'm committed to that. Being a good leader, like I said, doesn't just happen. You don't just wake up. You really, and I'm always observing. I'm always asking questions. I really try to live and breathe those pillars that I shared with you today.
Yeah, I'll definitely look into that because, that's one of the things that have inspired me the most since, starting to work. Because I currently work at the Ontario Institute for Cancer Research, and I work a lot. I've been, I've worked a lot under different PIs, and then and I've been really lucky so far to have leaders and mentors who are really supportive and really encouraging, and that has been so great for and like fueling my passion for doing research and science. And that's something that I would like to emulate later on when I become a scientist myself. So I will definitely look into that.
Well,
So we do
that example that you brought was is a perfect example of what a leader is, right? They showed you how do you interact with people, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you make them feel connected and important and special, right? And I think that in itself, that's great. Good.
So we have one more question in the chat box, and they are asking, are there any similarities between a team leader and a coach?
Okay, that's a really, really good question. And I would say that there are a lot of similarities. Okay, so a team leader, as the name would suggest, is about leading a team, right? And if you want to use that sport analogy, right, you can have a team coach. And a team coach, they don't just play their best player, right? A team doesn't succeed just from one player alone. It's about making sure that everyone on the team is performing at their max, at their best, okay? And so I do feel that a team leader and a coach, there are a lot of similarities, because in order to ensure that employees are showing up as their best, it means that you need to coach individuals, right? Coach them to have the capabilities that they need to be part of the team, that's clearly, but also to coach them on these soft skills, right? So that example that you provided, Suki, where you were, working in a team and everyone, looking for ideas. Well, sometimes you need to help individuals, because sometimes people are so enthusiastic that they forget to let others have a chance to speak. And so we all have blind spots. And this is where team leads can also coach individuals, not in front of everybody, because you don't want to do that in a way, or you can do it in terms of, that's really, really great. I see, Joey over here looks like he would also like to say something. And then what you can do is you can pull that person aside later and just say, listen, I love the enthusiasm and motivation that you bring to the team. But it's really, really important that you allow others an opportunity also to share in, because sometimes if they feel that they're, if they don't have that opportunity, then they'll start to close down. And I don't want to see that either. So clearly that's another example of where the team lead could coach an individual to observe some behaviors. So, and I really think it's all about working with every individual to not just identify their blind spots, because I believe that we as leaders need to leverage our strengths. And there's another book, I believe, by the same individual called Strength Finders. Similar situation, a small book, very affordable, comes with its own little self-assessment, and it gives you an opportunity to really, going back to that leadership and self-awareness, understanding the strengths. And so as a team lead, I always make sure that before we start on any long-term project, that we spend a little bit of time to invest in the team, invest in each other, so that everyone understands and appreciates the strengths that they bring to the table, as opposed to focusing on the weaknesses. So there's definitely a lot of similarities.
Yeah, those are definitely some really interesting points you mentioned there, because, obviously as a team leader, you're really, I think, at least for me, like especially when I'm put in a leadership position, like I'm really focused on getting things done. And like, if we have a project, we will need to get it done. But then I guess I don't really think about like the coaching aspect, it's like, say an individual is struggling, and then it's like, how do I better support them so that they are performing, as you said, performing at their maximum potential. So that's something I didn't think about before. It's just a lot of the time I think as team leaders we're just focused on getting things done, and it's true, we want everyone to contribute, but then at the same time people are people, and each one of us have their own like strengths and weaknesses, and probably that coaching aspect is also a really important aspect or like a skill to have as team leader. Yep. And I think we are closing in on time, so I think I just have one last question for you, and it's just for all the young people who are listening here, do you have any like additional advice for them on like really actionable steps for them to continue to improve their leadership and communication skills?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, if you don't have a plan, right, you'll never know if you reach your destination, right? If you don't have a map. And so I really think that, in today's day and age, there is no shortage of amazing resources that are out there. So I think it really needs to start your journey with the end in mind, right? Visualize where you would like to see yourself 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and start to pull out job descriptions of a job that you would like, and read through the requirements that they're looking for. You can look at the description of the job, but what are the requirements that they're looking for? And then start to plan an action. Now, people always say to me, Fran, they want people management skills, but how do I get people management skills if I can't get a job? Well, I will often say, well, look for transferable skills. So yes, there's people management skills, but there's also matrix leadership skill. And being a matrix leader is a hell of a lot harder than being a people leader, right? So I think, once again, it really starts by really reflecting and planning where you envision yourself. And then once you do that, and you kind of pick that dream job, right? That job description with those capabilities, then you can start to read and observe and find mentors that you say, yes, they actually had that experience, and then use that. And then also through your daily experiences, whether it's at work or even extracurricular. It's really important to, really broaden that, because that shows as well flexibility and adaptability. You don't want all of your experience to only come in one setting, right? You want to demonstrate that, you have adaptability, that you have vast experience working in various, professional and non-professional environments. And I think that is really what I would recommend.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I'm going to open up the floor to anybody else who may have any comments if you would like to speak to Fran instead of putting it in the chat box. So let's give people like a minute or two. And see if anybody has any additional comments and questions.
Please seize the opportunity before we call it a day. It is really a wonderful, wonderful presentation. So on behalf of CNW and all our young audience, I really would like to extend our heartfelt thanks to your outstanding presentations.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And
Thank
thank you
you.
for the invitation. I'd love to see any thumbs up if people, or thumbs down if people found it was helpful. But I truly hope that some of my pearls of wisdom might serve you well in your journey ahead. And, it's, when I'm looking at you, Suki, and knowing everyone here, it's really, you've got a tremendous journey ahead of you, an exciting journey ahead of you. And I wish you all the luck and hope that some of these pearls will serve you well on your journey ahead. So take care, and look forward to hopefully our paths crossing again.
Yes, of course. And I think absolutely for Suki, then this year she is our third year TA for our summer camp. So I think for the coaching leadership thing that she can apply it a lot right instantly in this summer.
Nice. Well,
Yeah,
great
for sure.
job, Suki. You did a great job moderating the session. You should be very proud.
Thanks so much.
Good.
Okay, so do we have any questions? Or any comments? Or anyone would like to turn on your camera and show the applause? Well.